Hey guys, hope everyone's having a great Monday. We had a great weekend here, lovely, full of sun, and as you can tell, I've been in the sea, and as you can tell by my Instagram feed here, be sure to follow if you don't follow already. I basically live in the sea. But today's topic is going to be curves in Lightroom. So I use curves an insane amount of times for my sunrise and sunset shots. They are like my go-to. It's my first thing to edit when I go onto Lightroom, so the curve adjustment is so important. You can squeeze so many different kinds of colors out just by curves alone, so that is why it's my primary tool to use for sunrise and sunset shots. With this kind of tool, I'm going to be using two photos, and I'm going to make this video into two parts for a raw shot and a phone shot. So this one's going to be a phone shot that I shot with a Samsung S20 or P20. I always get them confused. I know it's awful, but I shot with a Samsung phone, and it's always a bit harder since it's not raw to squeeze a bit of color out of it, but hopefully you can follow along. I'm going to upload a link to my Google Drive account with the two photos on it so that you can edit along. And of course, throughout the video, feel free to pause it or whatever so that you can mess around with it, because that's the whole point of this. Like, that's how you learn. You mess around with colors, you mess around with whatever else. So without further ado, let's get into this. Okay, so now that we're in Lightroom, this shot, as you can see, this shot has some nice kind of pastel pinks and some nice kind of blues on it. So I'm going to show before and after. So this is obviously after, and where is it? So we go for before and after. So as you can see, I pulled some shadows out, changed the colors quite a lot. Got some kind of turquoisey blue. The girl in the photo is Rachel. She's really dark in the original, and then in the after photo, she's much brighter. As you can see, I kind of in the shadows, so a lot of the blue is actually in the shadows. So it looks like I've done pink highlights and then bluer, darker shadows. So let's get into this right now. I'll try and mimic it. I don't know if I definitely can. So we go back. I'm gonna resize it for Instagram first off. First and foremost, resize it for Instagram. So 4:5 in the top right. If you go to aspect ratio, it's going to be 4:5 or 8:10. If you press option and click on any corner, you can bring it down so it's like the whole size of the square like shrinks in. Okay, so first things first, the curves. Now I was saying this at the start of the video, and it is super important. You use curves for everything, like even the smallest adjustment. If you want it brighter, and as I said in the last video, if you want it brighter, this is like the standard curve. Well, not that serious. This is like the standard curve you'd see. It looks a bit like an S. What I've seen a lot of people do is if you bring the back, I think this is the shadows or the blacks. If you take the blacks and put them a bit up, it kind of gives you like a grainy kind of like black. Hang on, zoom in. It kind of gives your blacks a tiny bit of a gray, so they're not completely black, but I don't want that for this shot right now. So first things first, I'm gonna make it a bit brighter because it is a pastel kind of shot. I used to work with very dark colors, but I think a nice pastel kind of shot is what we're going for anyway. So that's in and around how I'd like it. But you go through like the RGB as well, so it's not just the overall curve. So to get some colors going through, if you go for the top, that's the highlights first. So that's gonna, on my Lightroom, you can obviously see which color is going to be which. So if I push the red up, it's gonna be too red. If I go down, it's gonna be really green or cyan. So if you actually, it's the smallest adjustment. So I'm going to bring the shadows down a bit. So you can already see the cyan in the shadows. And then the reds, pull that up a bit more so we can get a bit more pinky kind of sky in. Now for the greens, I'm gonna go down to purple, but not a whole lot of purple. I'm gonna bring the shadows up a bit more so you can see a bit of green. Actually, I might make that less purple because I can do that after. So something like that, something bright. That doesn't look terrible. And go to the blues then. I'm gonna bring the blues up a tiny bit because you can see in the water they're already a bit bluer, which is exactly what you want. Don't think I want a yellow. No, I don't. So I'm gonna make it as blue as possible. So that's kind of like just literally fiddle around with the curves. Nothing's gonna be too like stupid because that's like crazy pink. So it's like the smallest adjustments with the curves. Obviously it's going to change with like depending on where you shot. If you shot the sun directly on, or if you shot like a person, the skin colors will change. But it's basically like, I normally use the same settings for a curve. I'd have a preset for something and use that curve. So it really is a matter of just messing around with it. Like, that's all it takes. So since this is a pastel shot, I do want it as bright as possible. So I'm gonna go back up to the basic tools. So if I pump up the shadows, you can already see there's a bit of color coming back into Rachel's face. And I'm gonna get the exposure. Maybe I want to preserve the highlights. I want to take down the highlights because you get a bit of color left there, and maybe you can whack up the exposure that tiny bit more. So I really like how that's looking already. It looks got that kind of tropical vibe. Just making sure it's straight. It looks that kind of tropical vibe, and surprisingly it is in Ireland. But as I was saying at the start of the video, again, this is not a raw shot, so this is a bit more difficult to mess around with and play with. The colors aren't going to be as easy to mess with and to change up. So I'm doing with it what I can. And honestly, like, this is like one of the originals. Like, I'm pretty happy with it. The colors are pretty spectacular in it. And I think that's it for the basic adjustments. I'm going to change the hue and see, like, you can get that kind of pinky kind of tropical vibe just with messing with the calibration, but I'm not going to do that right now because I don't normally mess with calibration. If I was going to change the color of something, I change it by temperature, and that's something I stick by, because with a brush or with a graduated yeah, it is a graduated filter, excuse me, you can adjust it yourself, whereas with a calibration it's the whole image and it's going to change regardless. So I think for now I'm going to use the brush, make that a bit bigger. I'm going to go into a blue piece and press Command Brush and brush it in, and as you can see I have my brushes highlighted so you can see where I'm highlighting. So this is the Show Selected Mask Overlay. I'm going to bring the exposure down a bit because it looks a bit bright, and just make sure I get this in. I'm going to turn the mask off, going to bring down the blues so you get a bit of blue, put the exposure up, and then I'm going to desaturate it. So you get that kind of, with the color as well, I'm going to put a bit darker, maybe drop the exposure. So that's really nice. That looks like a kind of tropical place. I'm going to change the hue a tiny bit, see if I can do anything like that. That looks like that's Greece right there. That's not Ireland, that's Greece. So then we were going to mess around with the blues a tiny bit more, but for now I'm going to put a graduated filter up over it, and that's already pretty nice. That's only 10 on the temperature, and then on the exposure it's only a tiny bit up. So I'm going to drop the exposure, maybe pull down the purple tint, and then on this temperature I'm going to make it a bit warmer, or make it as warm as possible even, because that doesn't look too bad. Bring it down because that pastel kind of looks class. And then in the basic I'm going to bring the highlights. Ooh, see, that's where you start. I don't want to lose too much detail in the background, like in the sky, but I want to have it as bright as possible. Like, if you lose the contrast, that's not centered. That's been annoying me the whole time. Okay, so if you kind of lose the contrast, it doesn't look too bad. And then obviously it depends on how you edit. Like, I used to edit super dark and like I'd be happy out with that, but now I'm starting to definitely move towards the pastels. So keeping that contrast low is definitely important. Maybe bring out some highlights, drop the shadows. I'm gonna go back into this here brush that I put down and just mess around with it a tiny bit more. Maybe bring up the saturation, drop down the blues, maybe put a bit of green into it. Oh, that's not looking too bad. Bring up the exposure and bring up the overall exposure. And I think I'm gonna go back to the curves and then bring the shadows out a bit more like that. That's what I want, that's it. And then drop the highlights. So with that, like, it looks great. And then Rachel, like, so with this subject in the middle, I'm gonna press Command and then draw on. Hopefully the brush is big enough. So yeah, it looks like she's been drawn on mainly, but I'm just gonna get some extra pieces and erase. So it depends on how bright or not you want the image as well. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. I'm gonna actually make her a bit brighter. Turn that off. I'm gonna make that a bit brighter. Like that looks pretty good. That really looks like somewhere tropical. That doesn't look like Ireland. But I definitely love that. It may not be exactly the same, but it's a lot of tweaking, and that actually looks like I just saturated it up way. So if I bring this in and then put a brush, get that blue kind of going. Hang on, let's get this. It's all about the blues, isn't it? It's all about the blues. It's the blues that you want. It's just a lot of tweaking really. And it's just like balancing. So you could probably put like I did in the last video, if you duplicate it and then have this one go all the way to like change the temperature on it to kind of a bit warmer, you get that weird kind of where they like overlap, and it does look pretty nice on some shots. It doesn't, I don't like it on this shot, so I'm going to mess around with it a bit more. You just want to change that blue, isn't it? No, I'll get rid of that. You just want to change that blue the smallest bit, like that, like maybe a bit more like that. I'm gonna take the pinks out. See the way the pinks have started to come in? So another tip, if you go into, what are these even called? The HSL color menu. If you press the button beside it, so there's like a circular button like this here, beside hue, saturation, luminance. So if you click that button and go to one singular color, it'll change the entire color of that one color on the whole image. So that like you can desaturate certain things, you can change the luminance on other things. So yeah, no, I'm just messing around here. So with this saturation, you could either put it in. I definitely don't want that pink, so I'm gonna take that pink out. Oh, I'll change the sky. Bear with me now. Like that's not looking terrible. That's looking pretty nice, I think. I'm gonna drop the shadows, bring out a bit of contrast, higher the, like that look, I'm happy with that. That looks excellent. So I reckon just mess around with it. I'm gonna, like I said at the start of the video, I'm gonna upload the shots onto a Google Drive and you can just mess around. So this is the before and after, and as I said, like it's a quick edit. It's not gonna be perfect in like what 15 minutes or 10 minutes that I've been doing this. But no, I'm happy enough with that, and then it's just lots of tweaking. But yeah, like that's another, like, so just even to look at the before and after on this, like look how dark, look how different it is. The tonal curves make such a difference, and whether you're just using the overall curve or you're adjusting a color, like it'll make a massive difference regardless. And like I could bring, even right now, I could bring more red into it or less red, and like it's obviously going to change the whole vibe. So on the right side of the curve, it's mainly highlights, and on the left side of the curve, it's all going to be shadows and black. So then on the far right, it's going to be whites, and then on the far left, it's going to be black. So that's what these two are. So if I bring that down, it'll bring the whites out, and if I bring this up, it'll bring the blacks out. So that's basically what it is. That's understanding it. And just mess around, and you're never going to learn unless you do play around with it. You can't learn just by watching. So like you could do some funky things. Like I've seen people do negatives on this. I wonder if I can do it right now. Kind of, oh, that's like print worthy right there. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be my style, but so that's like, just mess around with the curves, have some fun. Like it's not serious unless you're doing it for work, and then you need to learn as fast as possible. Then it is pretty serious. But no, guys, I hope if you edited along, you had a lot of fun and you learned some bits here and there. And then if you are editing on your own shot, I hope you learned some bits and pieces. So guys, look, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm getting great feedback on these. And if you have anything to say at all, like good or bad, I'd love to know and see how I can improve this, like this whole experience, because it's a learning curve for me as well anyway. So look, be sure to like, rate, subscribe, and give me a follow on Instagram, because this is where a lot of the photos I'm posting are going straight to. So I guess I'll see you next Monday on the raw version of this shot. And until then, I hope everyone has a great week, and I'll see you later.